Hello there, YouTube. Today's video is going to be more on the reenacting side, although I suppose role players might find some of this information useful. Since I started getting into early medieval reenacting and sparring, I knew I needed to make a shield. And I did find some YouTube videos that I will post in the description below that were fairly helpful in constructing my shield. I also used period sources where I could. Of course, manuscripts usually only have the heraldic side facing out. They don't show the straps. But since I was going for late 11th or late 12th, early 13th century, so about 1175 to say 1275, 1250. I was going with a more French or Norman inspired kit, and with that in mind, I decided to make the traditional Norman kite shield, which, since, if I'm hoping you know your history, the Normans were really just resettled Vikings. Comparing their equipment, especially in the Bayeux tapestry, some people pronounce it different, and I could be pronouncing it wrong too. But the Bayeux tapestry is one of the best sources of pictorial information as far as what people's dress look like, what people's, well, probably not the buildings as much because they're all kind of stylized and cartoony, but it shows somewhat realistic depictions of armor and the tactics, and it does show the back side of the shield that many of the knights are carrying, and there seems to be some differences between a Viking shield and a Norman shield. Obviously, the shape here is one, but there have been Viking kite shields found. By the 11th century, the Vikings are starting to create and use the longer shield. It does, if I can back up and show you, it does offer significant more protection to my leg, and you can't see that. And I lost the link to the article, but I was reading an article the other day that described a Viking kite shield made out of 2 layers of wood, thin wood, glued together at different, the planes are glued together at 90-degree angles, so you have one grain going this way and a second grain going this way. That creates more strength, and then it had the traditional glue and linen laminated feature. So if somebody tells you they didn't use plywood back in history, they did. It just wasn't the same as our plywood where we have 5, 6, 7, 8 ply. Usually it was 1 or 2, and often it was reinforced with linen or fibrous, pulpy grains like papyrus would be one of them. That's not much of a medieval thing, but I know at least as far back as the Bronze Age, thin wood, reinforce it with papyrus and kind of a resin that creates a layered effect, and then you layer it at different angles to give it strength in all directions. So what you have with a traditional Viking shield, big round shield, metal center boss, and then the back you'd have a solid wood bar post essentially that would be bolted in the entire length of the shield, so that way you have as much support as possible and there's no stress points towards the boss. It gives you as much strength as you possibly can. I have obviously not done the center boss. As I was kind of looking at the Bayeux tapestry, I noticed that with most of the Saxon shields they had the center boss, although some of them were kite shields. None of the kite shields have the center boss, but that could be artist depictions, kind of vary, but probably about a third of the Norman shields didn't have the center boss. And the center boss makes sense when you have a single-handed or a single grip shield, whereas mine is the straps. And I purposely left one long so I would be able to throw it over my shoulder whenever I don't feel like carrying the damn thing. But at the same time, I can just grab it like that and I have my shield secured just as if I had the double strap, but I got enough extra slack that I can throw it over my shoulder like that. That's kind of an improvisation I made. You can kind of tell on the tapestry that there is extra bits of leather, because the straps seem to be made much longer, like they go from top to bottom, or you can see what looks like a leather piece there as a loop. And also period descriptions of Vikings having their shield on their back when they used the two-handed, the Dane axe. So during the Dark Ages and early medieval time, seemed to be common enough, at least with period sources, I found that carrying the shield would be appropriate. So using that Viking model, I did the modifications. As you can see, I did the strap, which I think the reason they went to, there we go, the reason they went to this strap as opposed to the single boss, the single hand, the center grip, I don't want to call it a center grip because it's not on the center of the shield. The shield doesn't have a true center like a round shield does. But this is conjecture on my part, but I think they went to this strap style because it makes more sense when you're mounted. I think that having the single grip, it'd be easier to knock it out of your hand as opposed to this, which even if I let go or I lose my grip, I still got it and I can get my grip going again. And personally, from working with it and carrying it around, I actually kind of prefer the two straps as opposed to the center grip. I think it distributes the weight a little bit better, although there is a slight delay as my arm moves and then the leather kind of tenses with the movement. But otherwise, I pretty much kept to the Viking format. The rim is rawhide that I soaked. One of the videos that I saw mentioned taking like these dog bone rawhide chew toys, which I took a dozen of those, smaller ones, and threw them in a bucket I had, left them overnight. What the video doesn't tell you is it has the most foul smell, so you'd probably want to do it in a garage. But I did have enough to rim the whole shield, and I have a little bit extra, so that wasn't a problem. And what I did, you might be able to see that here, is I took some I don't remember if I think it said escutcheon pins, but they're basically little brass finishing nails. Not historical. I took my drill, pre-drill the hole so that way I knew it'd seat, and I knew I'd have a perfectly good hole in both my rawhide and my wood that would line up nicely, and I wouldn't have that shift whenever I'd hammer that in. Little cheat on my part, but I think it's not a part of construction that you can tell. I used plywood instead of a solid piece of wood. It was just cheaper, and I pulled it out of the bargain chipped and dented pile at Menards. I was going to cut that corner off anyway, so it didn't matter that it started peeling in one section. With my straps, this is actually an old Dickies work belt, and it was starting to kind of deform, and it was way too long, and the spacing and the pre-drilled holes gave me the option of making my straps adjustable, and I just took 5/8 thick diameter machine screws, some washers, and some nuts. And yes, I understand that that's not historically correct, but I wanted the shield to be adjustable. I didn't know if my mailed arm and fist would be able to fit through the strap, so I kind of made a few cheats. If I did make another shield in the future, might be able to kind of see, yeah, right here, pretty noticeable. This is actually where the screw head on the other side is popping out, and I didn't think it would be that obvious, and it does kind of pull up, and so there's a few little spots where it's not glued down, but it's heavy canvas. It's been glued to a piece of plywood, and then rimmed it in the rawhide, nailed it in, just took the ends of it, bent them back to keep it in place, and once it dried, it's on there. I haven't actually used this sucker for combat, but I'm feeling that you know, at least last a couple sparring matches. It feels quite solid. It's fairly light. As far as the heraldry goes, I kind of scraped and rubbed it off to give it a more worn finish. It was too thick. I used acrylic paint. I know tempera paint is historically correct. Acrylic paint didn't come out till the 20th century. Oil-based paints, 18th or 19th century, I believe, maybe 17th century, so that's way out of there. But all I had was acrylic on hand, and I didn't feel like buying more paint when I already had the colors I needed. With the exception of the machine screws, the fact that it's plywood, and the fact that I used the acrylic paint, I made this to as close to historic standards as I could. Well, of course the belt's not that historic, but it is leather, and that's historic enough. If you do want to make your own Viking shield or Norman shield, like I said, I'll leave a couple links down below that I used, other videos that I found quite helpful, and look at your sources. Get a historical, either a sculpture or a tapestry or even an illuminated manuscript. The Majowski Bible is a real good one, although I don't think it has a lot of the more Northern European construction on their shields. From what I remember, most of them are the triangular heater style shield, which is more 13th, 14th century. But for the most part, this is a pretty common design and construction in the 12th and into the 13th century for Northern Europe, Scandinavia, England, French Normandy and Brittany, some of the Germanic states, Frisians, Saxons, etc. That's, I think, all I've got to ramble about. Hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.